Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. The first time I saw the symbol, I thought it was just another tattoo. Working in Craven County's disused morgue facility, you see all kinds of markings on the deceased. But this was different, a spiraling whorl etched in dark crimson that hadn't been there when I'd locked up the night before. I remember staring at it, coffee growing cold in my hand, wondering how the hell a corpse gets a fresh marking overnight in a locked facility. By evening, the body was gone. No paperwork, no transfer records, nothing. Just an empty drawer and a lingering scent of burnt sugar. That was 3 months ago, my first week on the job. My name is Ellis Marsh, and I took this position because New Bern, North Carolina, seemed like a good place to disappear. The town sits where the Neuse and Trent rivers meet, draped in Spanish moss and Civil War history, with enough small-town secrets to hide one more: me. I'd been running from Chicago since the accident at Mercy General. 10 years as an orderly, and one mistake cost 3 lives. They said it wasn't my fault, that the equipment malfunctioned. But I saw their eyes when they looked at me. I know what they thought. So I fled south, following job listings until I found this one: caretaker for the old county morgue facility. The listing said they needed someone to maintain the building while the county decided what to do with it. The pay wasn't great, but it included lodging in the caretaker's apartment upstairs, and most importantly, no one asked too many questions. "It's a simple job," Ms. Holloway from county administration had said, not looking up from her paperwork. "Keep the place from falling apart. Make sure no kids break in. Report any structural issues." What she didn't mention was that the place wasn't exactly empty. The county coroner's office had moved to a new facility across town 2 years ago, but budgetary issues meant some of their long-term residents were still stored here. Unclaimed bodies, medical examiner backlogs, and what they called special cases, ones requiring extended observation before release. "You'll barely notice them," Ms. Holloway had assured me when I asked. "The ME's assistant drops by twice a week to check on things. Just don't go poking around the cold storage." I didn't plan to. The morgue occupied the basement of the old Wharton Medical Building, a limestone structure from the 1930s that seemed to absorb sunlight rather than reflect it. The upper floors housed my apartment and several abandoned offices, their doors sealed with county tape. For the first month, it was peaceful. I cleaned, fixed leaky pipes, replaced flickering lights, and walked to Lawson's corner store for supplies. Sometimes I'd sit by the Neuse River, watching shrimp boats drift past, trying to convince myself I'd found somewhere I could start over. Then people started showing up after dark. A black van with tinted windows. Men and women in clothes too formal for New Bern's humid nights. They'd nod at me like we shared a secret, use keys I didn't know existed, and leave before dawn. After their third visit, I found a manila envelope outside my apartment door, containing a handwritten list of rules and the salary increase, enough to make asking questions seem foolish. I should have asked anyway. I should have left when the whispers started coming from behind the sealed doors on the second floor. I should have called someone when I found bloody footprints leading from cold storage to the old service elevator. Footprints that vanished halfway across the floor. But I stayed, because everyone deserves a second chance, right? Even me, especially me. And now, I'm writing this all down because last night, another body disappeared. But this time, I saw where it went. This time, I followed it. And if I don't make it back from tonight's shift, someone needs to know about the rules. Someone needs to know what's happening beneath the old Wharton Medical Building in New Bern. Because the dead aren't staying dead here, and the symbol that marks them isn't just a symbol. It's a key. The rules arrived on aged parchment, yellowed at the edges and smelling faintly of formaldehyde. 7 items, handwritten in faded blue ink. Always acknowledge the deceased by name when opening their drawer. Never enter cold storage between 3:17 a.m. and 4:38 a.m. If you hear knocking from inside a drawer, verify the name tag before responding. The elevator is not to be used. Ever. Leave a light on in the east corridor at all times. The supply closet on sub-level 2 requires permission to enter. Should you encounter Dr. Mercer, do not, under any circumstances, look at what he's working on. I folded the paper and tucked it into my back pocket, wondering who Dr. Mercer was and why the county had never mentioned a sub-level 2. The building plans I'd received showed only the basement morgue and 2 upper floors. My first night following the rules coincided with what locals called flood tide, when the News River swells with rainwater from upstream. The air hung heavy with moisture, making the corridors feel narrower. I started my rounds at 11 p.m., clipboard in hand, checking locks and temperatures. The old Wharton Medical Building creaked as I walked, its wooden supports groaning against the foundation. Cold storage comprised a wall of stainless steel drawers, 48 in total, though only 11 were occupied according to my inventory sheet. "Good evening, Mr. Santiago," I said, feeling ridiculous as I checked drawer 7. The paper listed him as a drowning victim, awaiting family transfer to Puerto Rico. "Evening, Ms. Kendrick." Drawer 13. Heart failure, unclaimed. I moved methodically through the list, addressing each name before checking the temperature gauge beside their drawer. The ritual felt oddly comforting, like saying a small prayer for each person whose body lay forgotten in this limestone tomb. At drawer 23, I paused. "Good evening, John Doe number 4. The chart listed him as a male approximately 40 to 45 years old, found 3 weeks ago in the Croatan National Forest. Cause of death unknown. When I pulled open the drawer, my breath caught. Centered on his bare chest was a fresh marking, a spiral pattern etched in deep red, the skin around it unmarked. The symbol resembled the one I'd seen months ago, but more complex, with small lines branching from the main whorl. "What the hell?" I whispered, pulling on latex gloves from my pocket. I leaned closer, examining the marking without touching it. The lines weren't tattooed or cut into the skin. They seemed to emerge from beneath it, like veins rising to the surface. A soft click echoed behind me. I turned to find the lights in the far corridor dimming, then brightening in a slow pulse. Above them, the wall clock read 3:16 a.m. Rule number 2 flashed in my mind. I needed to leave, now. Shutting the drawer hastily, I muttered, "Sorry, John," and hustled toward the exit. The temperature in the room dropped rapidly, my breath clouding before me as I reached for the door. The handle wouldn't turn. I jiggled it, then pulled harder, panic rising in my throat. Through the small reinforced window, I could see the main corridor, empty and silent. 3:17 a.m. A gentle tapping sound began behind me. Like fingernails on metal. I didn't want to turn around. The tapping continued, faster now, coming from drawer 23. John Doe number 4. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cold. I backed against the door, keeping my eyes on the wall of drawers. The tapping stopped. Then drawer 23 slid open, just an inch. Then another inch. No one was pulling it. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin, childlike. "Is someone there?" The drawer slid fully open, revealing the empty interior. John Doe number 4 was gone. A crash from the adjacent autopsy room sent me scrambling along the wall, searching for another exit. The service door near the supply cabinets. It had to be unlocked. As I inched along the wall, the overhead lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Only the faint glow from the exit sign remained, casting everything in a sickly red haze. In that dim light, I saw something move by the open drawer, a silhouette, hunched and dripping. It turned toward me, and though I couldn't make out a face, I felt its awareness lock onto me. I bolted for the service door, fumbling with the push bar. It gave way, and I tumbled into the adjoining corridor, slamming the door behind me. The east corridor, where rule number 5 said to always leave a light on. The hallway stretched before me in perfect darkness. No exit signs, no emergency lights, nothing but a void pulling at my senses. From somewhere ahead came the gentle sound of water dripping, then footsteps, wet, slapping footsteps, moving slowly in my direction. I reached for my phone, but my pocket was empty. My light, my connection to the outside world, gone. The footsteps drew closer. A voice, garbled as if speaking through liquid, whispered from the darkness, "Do you know my name?" I backed away, feeling along the wall for any door, any escape. My fingers found a panel, smooth, with small buttons. The elevator. Rule number 4. The elevator is not to be used. Ever. The wet footsteps quickened. A hand, cold, damp and rough like wet paper, brushed against my arm. I jabbed at the elevator button. Rules be damned. The door slid open with a cheerful ding, spilling warm yellow light into the corridor. I stumbled inside, punching the button for the first floor repeatedly. As the doors began to close, I caught a glimpse of what stood in the hallway, a figure composed of darkness and water, its chest carved with the spiral symbol, now glowing faintly red. The doors sealed shut. The elevator hummed to life, and then it began descending instead of rising, down toward a floor that didn't exist on any blueprint, down toward sublevel 2. The elevator shouldn't have been functioning at all. County maintenance had disconnected the power months ago, citing safety concerns with the aging machinery. Yet here I was, descending smoothly, the vintage floor indicator needles swinging past B for basement, continuing downward toward an unmarked position. I pressed every button on the panel. Nothing changed. The elevator continued its quiet journey downward. My watch read 3:22 a.m., still in the forbidden time window of rule number 2. The car slowed, then stopped with a gentle bounce. The doors, however, remained closed. Through their narrow gap, I glimpsed not a hallway, but rough concrete walls. The scent of damp earth and something chemical, ethanol maybe, seeped through. I waited, heart hammering. After 30 seconds of silence, I pried my fingers into the gap and pulled. The doors grudgingly slid apart. I found myself facing not a corridor, but a small antechamber carved directly from the earth. The only illumination came from a single bulb hanging from exposed wiring. The walls glistened with moisture, and the floor was packed dirt. A metal door with no handle stood opposite the elevator. "Hello?" I called, my voice absorbed by the earth. No answer. As I stepped out, the elevator doors slid shut behind me. The button to recall it was missing, replaced by a small metal plate. I approached the doorless entry, examining it closely. No hinges were visible, just seamless metal set into concrete. In its center was a small depression, circular, about the size of a quarter. Below it, someone had scratched words into the concrete. "When you're ready to join us, press your palm against the mark." I backed away, rubbing my hands on my jeans. The chill down here seeped through my uniform, making my fingers stiff. A soft click drew my attention upward. The light bulb had gone out. Total darkness enveloped me. Not the darkness of a room at night, with faint outlines still visible, but absolute, perfect blackness. I fumbled for my flashlight, finding it clipped to my belt where it always was, not missing as I'd feared upstairs. A small mercy. When I flicked it on, the beam revealed something new on the wall beside the metal door. A dark handprint, glistening wet as if freshly pressed. It hadn't been there seconds ago. I swept the flashlight around the tiny room, checking every corner. No other exits, no hiding spots. I was alone, yet someone had just placed that mark. A droplet fell from the ceiling, landing on my shoulder. Cold, viscous, not water. I looked up, aiming my light at the low ceiling. The spiral symbol stared back at me, drawn in what looked horribly like fresh blood, spanning the entire ceiling. In its center, rivulets were forming, gathering into drops that fell with increasing frequency. I stumbled backward, colliding with the elevator doors. My watch displayed 3:38 a.m. 20 minutes left in the forbidden time. I pounded on the elevator doors, then tried to pry them open again. They wouldn't budge. More droplets fell, landing on my head and shoulders. Each one burned slightly against my skin. My options were non-existent. Wait here for whatever was forming above me, or try the metal door with no handle. I approached it again, studying the depression. It wasn't circular after all, but spiral-shaped, matching the ceiling pattern. Another drop landed on my hand, and I stared in horror as the liquid began to sink into my skin, leaving behind a faint, red mark. Within seconds, a tiny portion of the spiral pattern had transferred itself to me. No! I wiped frantically at my hand, but the mark remained. The ceiling dripped faster now, forming tiny puddles on the dirt floor. Where the liquid touched, the ground seemed to dissolve, creating small holes that burrowed downward. In my panic, I pressed my palm against the door's depression, hoping for escape. The metal felt fever-hot against my skin. Nothing happened. Then I noticed. The depression didn't match the ceiling pattern. It spiraled in the opposite direction. On impulse, I placed my marked hand against it, aligning the partial spiral on my skin with the door's impression. A perfect fit. The door shuddered, then swung inward silently. Beyond lay a long corridor, carved through earth and stone, supported by old wooden beams. Electric bulbs and wire cages cast pools of yellow light at regular intervals. The air smelled fresher here, with hints of lemon and antiseptic. I stepped through quickly, pulling the door shut behind me. It sealed with a pneumatic hiss, locking me in. The corridor extended perhaps 50 yards before ending at another door. This one wooden, with a frosted glass window labeled Records. Normal, almost administrative. I checked my watch again. 3:42 a.m. Walking cautiously down the corridor, I noted several features that seemed out of place for a sublevel. Framed photographs hung on the earthen walls, black and white images of doctors and nurses standing before the Wharton Medical Building. In each photo, the same severe-looking man in wire-rimmed glasses stood slightly apart from the others, his expression grim. My footsteps echoed despite the dirt floor. The smell of lemons grew stronger as I approached the records room. I glanced back once, confirming my suspicion. No trace remained of the spiral mark on my hand. At the wooden door, I paused to listen. Silence. I turned the brass knob and entered. The records room contradicted everything I'd seen so far. It looked like a perfectly ordinary office from the 1950s, complete with metal filing cabinets, a typewriter on a wooden desk, and leather-bound ledgers stacked neatly on shelves. A radio sat silent in the corner, its vacuum tubes glowing softly. The calendar on the wall read, April 1953. I moved to the desk, examining the papers spread across it. Patient logs, requisition forms, death certificates, all dated between 1952 and 1953, all signed by Dr. Malcolm Mercer, Chief Medical Examiner. Rule number 7 flashed in my mind. Should you encounter Dr. Mercer, do not, under any circumstances, look at what he's working on. I rifled through the files, looking for anything about spiral symbols or John Doe number 4. The drawer labeled Special Cases caught my attention. Inside were dozens of thin folders, each containing a single sheet of paper and a black and white photograph. The papers held only numbers and cryptic notations, but the photos showed bodies, all with the spiral symbol marked on their chests. The last folder was newer than the others. Inside was a photo of John Doe number 4 as I'd seen him earlier tonight, the spiral fresh on his chest. The notation below read, Subject 218, transfer complete, awaiting reanimation. Transfer to where? A door I hadn't noticed before stood ajar at the back of the office. Through it, I glimpsed what looked like an operating theater, with an old-fashioned examination table at its center. Leather restraints hung from its sides. My watch read 4:36 a.m., almost through the forbidden time. I crept toward the door, peering around its edge. The room beyond was circular, its walls lined with glass-fronted cabinets containing surgical instruments. The examination table stood beneath a large overhead light, currently switched off. A figure hunched over the table, back to me. White coat, thin shoulders, wire-rimmed glasses visible in profile. Dr. Mercer, working on something I wasn't supposed to see. I began to back away when a floorboard creaked beneath my foot. The figure straightened but didn't turn. "Ah," he said, voice surprisingly warm and rich. "You've come earlier than the others. Good. We need help with the preparations." I remained frozen, unsure what to do. "Don't just stand there," Dr. Mercer said, still not turning. "Come and see what we're building. It's quite remarkable." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. I took another step back. "You've been marked," he continued. "I can smell it on you. The transference has begun." My hand tingled where the spiral had briefly appeared. "What transference?" I asked, my mouth dry. Dr. Mercer chuckled. "Why, the awakening, of course. The dead have been patient long enough, don't you think?" My watch beeped. 4:38 a.m. The forbidden time was over. "I need to go," I said. "Of course you do," Dr. Mercer replied, "but you'll be back. The symbol calls to its own." As if on cue, the overhead lights flickered. When they stabilized, Dr. Mercer was gone. In his place stood John Doe number 4, chest bare except for the raised spiral now covering his entire torso. He turned toward me, eyes milky white, smile too wide for his face. "Do you know my name now?" he asked, voice bubbling as if through liquid. I ran, slamming the office door behind me and sprinting down the earthen corridor. Behind me, wet footsteps slapped against dirt, gaining speed. The featureless metal door appeared ahead, now standing open. Beyond it, the elevator waited, doors spread wide. I lunged inside, hammering the button for the first floor. As the doors began to close, a hand, pale and dripping, reached through the gap. I stomped on it. The fingers cracked like twigs, dissolving into murky liquid that pooled on the elevator floor. The doors closed fully. The elevator rose. When it reopened, I was back in the main corridor of the basement morgue. My watch read 4:45 a.m. Dawn was still hours away, but I'd survived the forbidden hour. What I couldn't understand, was why my reflection in the stainless steel doors showed a faint red spiral beginning to form on my own chest. The mark on my chest faded by morning, leaving only a faint pink outline visible in the harsh bathroom light. I scrubbed at it until my skin reddened, but the pattern remained. A ghostly echo of what I'd seen on John Doe number 4. Sleep evaded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dr. Mercer's silhouette against the examination table, heard his warm, inviting voice. "You've been marked. The transference has begun." By noon, I'd made up my mind to leave New Bern. I stuffed clothes into my duffel bag, gathered my meager savings, and researched bus schedules on my phone. The earliest departure would leave at 7:15 p.m. from the station downtown. Plenty of time to get away. I was zipping my bag when someone knocked at my apartment door. 3 sharp raps, then silence. Through the peephole, I saw Miss Holloway from County Administration, her gray suit immaculate despite the summer heat, brown leather portfolio tucked under one arm. I cracked the door open, keeping the chain latched. "Ms. Holloway?" "Mr. Marsh." She smiled thinly. "May I come in? There's a matter we need to discuss regarding your employment." They know, I thought. They know I went to sublevel 2. My apartment was tiny, a converted office space with just enough room for a bed, kitchenette, and bathroom. Nowhere to hide my packed bag. I unlatched the chain and stepped back. "It's not much, but come in." Ms. Holloway surveyed the space, gaze lingering on my duffel. "Planning a trip?" "Just laundry," I lied. "The machines here broke last week." She nodded. "I'm convinced." "I understand you've had an eventful night, Mr. Marsh." My throat tightened. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Please." She sighed, extracting papers from her portfolio. "We monitor the facility. We know about your visit to the restricted area. No point denying it. What's down there? Who is Dr. Mercer?" Ms. Holloway perched on the edge of my desk chair, smoothing her skirt. Dr. Mercer was a pioneer in his field. His work continues to benefit the county in ways you cannot imagine. Was? Is. She corrected herself quickly. The doctor values his privacy. I gestured to the spiral mark on my chest, now hidden beneath my shirt. "And this? What does this mean?" For the first time, Ms. Holloway looked uncomfortable. "A misunderstanding. You weren't meant to receive the mark so soon. We typically wait until staff have demonstrated more commitment to our operation. I didn't ask for it. No one does initially." She handed me a document. "Your new contract. The salary has been adjusted to reflect your expanded responsibilities." I glanced at the figure. Triple my current pay. "What responsibilities?" "You'll assist with special transfers. Nothing complicated, just ensuring our unique subjects reach Dr. Mercer's laboratory." "The bodies with the symbols?" I asked. "Subjects," she corrected again. "And yes, they're part of a clinical trial." "On dead people?" Ms. Holloway's lips thinned. "Death is less binary than most believe, Mr. Marsh. There are thresholds, states between. Dr. Mercer explores these liminal spaces." I thought of John Doe number 4, his milky eyes and liquid-filled lungs, somehow animated and aware. "You're reanimating corpses." Crudely put, but essentially correct. We're reclaiming what can be salvaged. "For what?" Her expression softened fractionally. "Imagine never losing someone again. Imagine second chances for those taken too soon." The accident at Mercy General flashed through my mind. 3 lives lost because of my mistake. What if they could have been reclaimed? I pushed the thought away. It's not natural. Neither are pacemakers or artificial hearts, yet we celebrate those. Ms. Holloway stood, straightening her jacket. "The point is moot, Mr. Marsh. You've been marked. You're part of the process now." I backed toward the door. "I'm leaving. Tonight." "I wouldn't advise that." She nodded toward my chest. "The mark establishes a connection. The further you travel from the source, the more strain it places on your system. You're saying I can't leave? You can try. Her tone suggested many had. The pain starts around mile 20. By mile 50, most subjects report paralysis. By 100, she trailed off. You can't keep me here against my will. Ms. Holloway headed for the door. We're not keeping you anywhere. The mark is. Should you wish to leave regardless, we won't stop you. She paused, hand on the doorknob. But before you go, visit the town cemetery. North section, row 16. See what happens to those who ignore our warnings. After she left, I sat on my bed, contract untouched beside me. Through my window, I watched a shrimp boat navigate the bend in the News River, its wake spreading across the brackish water. 20 miles. That wasn't even enough to reach Jacksonville. I was trapped. The Willow Grove Cemetery occupied a gentle hill overlooking the river, its oldest stones dating back to colonial times. I found row 16 easily enough. Newer graves, dates mostly from the last decade. 5 markers stood apart from the others, their granite surfaces weathered beyond their years. Each bore the same epitaph, called back to service. I knelt before the most recent one, Thomas Wheeler, 1983 to 2021, called back to service. The name triggered a vague memory. Wheeler ... There had been a Wheeler on the morning news last year, a local accountant who disappeared while fishing. They'd found his boat drifting near the mouth of the river. The cemetery caretaker approached, pushing a wheelbarrow full of faded artificial flowers. He was ancient, skin tanned to leather by decades of Carolina sun. You knew him? He asked, nodding toward Wheeler's stone. No, just curious about the epitaph. Called back to service. I've never seen that before. The old man leaned on his wheelbarrow. County thing. Started about 30 years ago. All county employees who pass. These 5 all worked for the county? He squinted at me. You're the new fella at Wharton, ain't you? The Chicago boy. News traveled fast in small towns. That's me. Figured as much. They always send the new ones here eventually. He pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, tapped one out. Wheeler wasn't county, he was medical supply. Delivered to Wharton twice monthly. And the others? Sanitation engineer, construction worker who helped renovate the East Wing, night security guard, and her... He pointed to the oldest stone. She was a nurse. Worked with old Doc Mercer back when they still had patients there. I stared at the weathered stones, understanding dawning. They all had connections to the morgue. The caretaker lit his cigarette, exhaling a plume of smoke. More than that, they all tried to leave town. He tapped his chest significantly. After they got chosen, my hand instinctively covered the mark on my own chest. What happened to them? Can't rightly say. He turned to go, then paused. But I'll tell you this, those graves are all empty. Empty. County brings the caskets at night. Closed casket services. Family kept at a distance. But I dig the holes. And let me tell you, those boxes don't weigh enough to hold a full-grown person. He shuffled away, pushing his wheelbarrow over the uneven ground, leaving me alone with 5 empty graves and the growing certainty that I'd never leave New Bern alive. I returned to Wharton just as the sun began to set, casting long rays through the oak trees surrounding the property. The building looked innocent in the golden light, just another aging structure awaiting renovation or demolition. In my apartment, I found Miss Holloway's contract still on my bed, along with something new, a spiral-bound notebook, its cover worn and faded. A note was paper-clipped to it. Previous caretaker's journal. Might answer some questions. I flipped it open. The entries began 2 years ago, written in cramped, nervous handwriting. April 9th, 2023. Took the job today. Easy money for minimal work, they said. Just maintain the old morgue until the county decides what to do with it. Strange place, but beggars can't be choosers after what happened in Raleigh. I skimmed forward, watching the entries grow increasingly disturbed. June 17th, 2023. Found another body with the marking. Third this month. When I reported it, Ms. H just nodded like she expected it. Night visitors coming more frequently now. August 30th, 2023. Tried to quit today. Ms. H showed me something that changed my mind. God help me, I've never seen anything like it. The way it moved despite being October 5th, 2023. They gave me the mark today, said I'd earned it. Didn't feel like a reward. The entries grew shorter, more fragmented. December 12th, 2023. Tried to leave. Made it to Pollocksville before the pain started. Woke up back at Wharton somehow. Don't remember returning. January 8th, 2024. The voice in the walls keeps saying my name. The spiral on my chest spreads a little each day. The final entry, dated February 27th, 2024. It's changing me. I can feel parts of myself slipping away, being replaced with something else. Dr. M says it's a gift, but it feels like drowning in slow motion. If you're reading this, get out now, before the mark takes hold, before you end up like the others. Like me. The journal ended there. No explanation of what happened to the writer. No clue to their identity beyond the knowledge that they'd occupied this apartment less than 6 months ago. I checked my phone. 6:42 p.m. The bus would leave in just over 30 minutes. 20 miles of pain versus a lifetime trapped in Wharton, slowly transforming into whatever John Doe number 4 had become. The choice seemed obvious. I grabbed my duffel bag and Miss Holloway's contract, feeding the latter into my tiny kitchen sink and setting it ablaze. The smoke detector remained silent, disconnected during a renovation, never replaced. As I headed for the door, a knock came. 3 sharp raps, just like before. But when I checked the peephole, the corridor was empty. The knocking came again, not from the door, but from within my apartment. From the wall connecting to the sealed office next door. A voice, muffled yet distinct. Ellis? Ellis, I need your help. I froze, blood turning to ice in my veins. I knew that voice. I'd worked with its owner for 10 years at Mercy General in Chicago. David Chin, one of the 3 who died in the accident I caused. Ellis? The voice called again. I know you're there. Please. It hurts to be like this. I backed away from the wall, bumping into my desk. The journal fell open, revealing a final entry I'd missed, written in different handwriting on the last page. The dead speak with familiar voices. That's how they draw you in. That's how they make you break the rules. Rule number 3. If you hear knocking from inside a drawer, verify the name tag before responding. The rule hadn't specified what to do about knocking from inside walls. Ellis, please. I know what happened at Mercy wasn't your fault. David's voice sounded exactly as I remembered, soft with a slight New Jersey accent. My friend, my colleague, the man who'd trusted me to check the ventilator settings. You're not David, I said, voice shaking. David's dead. Am I? A bitter laugh filtered through the plaster. Not exactly. They brought part of me back, enough to remember, enough to suffer. I grabbed my duffel bag and backed toward the door. The bus would leave in 20 minutes. I could still make it. They'll just find you, David's voice continued. The mark connects you to this place, to us. They can track you anywhere. My hand froze on the doorknob. Who's they? Mercer and his staff. The ones who've been doing this since the 50s. Something thumped against the wall, like a body sliding down to the floor. You think you're the first caretaker to try running? We're all replacements for someone who failed. I pressed my ear against the wall. How do you know my name? How did you get here from Chicago? They brought me. After the accident, someone from Wharton claimed my body. Said they were from a research hospital, had the right paperwork. David's voice grew fainter. They brought all three of us. My stomach lurched. Sandra Kim and Ray Patel, the other victims of my mistake, were here too. What do they want from me? I asked. Same thing they want from all of us. Vessels. Anchors. David paused, breathing heavily. The spiral isn't just a mark. It's a door. A way back. Back from where? The border. The place between life and death. Mercer found it decades ago. A realm where consciousness lingers before moving on. He learned to pull fragments back, to anchor them in physical bodies. The wall creaked as if someone leaned against it. But the bodies reject the returning consciousness without a connection. David continued. The spiral creates that connection, lets the border dwellers latch on, stay present. I glanced at my phone. 6:49 p.m. The bus would leave in 26 minutes. David, I need to go. I can't help you. You already are. His voice darkened. Your guilt, your connection to us, it strengthens the anchor. That's why they brought us here, to bind you to this place. My chest tightened, the spiral mark tingling beneath my shirt. I'm leaving, now. Wait! David's voice grew desperate. There's another way. You can free us, all of us. I paused, hand on the doorknob. The supply closet on sublevel 2, he said. That's where Mercer keeps his research, all his notes on the border realm. Destroy them, and you sever the connection. The spirals fade. The anchors break. Rule number 6. The supply closet on sublevel 2 requires permission to enter. Why should I believe you? I asked. Because I'm dying again, Ellis. We all are. The anchors weren't meant to last this long. We're caught between worlds and it's... His voice cracked. It's worse than dying the first time. A deep rattling cough came through the wall. Help us finish crossing over, please. I checked my watch again. The last bus wouldn't wake. I had a choice to make. The morgue was quiet when I returned downstairs, my duffel stashed under my bed. The night shift wouldn't begin for another hour, giving me a window to search for answers. I headed for the elevator, pressing the button with resignation. The doors opened immediately, as if it had been waiting for me. This time I knew what to expect as I descended below the basement. The antechamber with its dirt floor and single bulb. The metal door with its spiral depression. What I didn't expect was to find the door already open, revealing the earthen corridor beyond. I stepped through cautiously, flashlight sweeping ahead of me. The framed photographs on the walls seemed different, the faces blurred, except for Dr. Mercer, who stared with crystal clarity from each image. I reached the records room and found it transformed. The neat office from my previous visit was now chaotic. Papers strewn across the floor, file cabinets tipped over, the desk chair splintered. A struggle had occurred here recently. The door to the examination theater stood wide open. Inside, the overhead surgical light blazed, illuminating an empty table with restraints hanging loose. I moved to the back of the room, where a plain wooden door labeled Supply waited. No lock, just a simple knob. Rule number 6 echoed in my mind. I needed permission. But from whom? As if in answer, the room's temperature plummeted. My breath fogged before me as a figure materialized beside the examination table, Dr. Mercer, his wire-rimmed glasses gleaming in the surgical light. You've returned. He smiled, revealing teeth too white. to uniform, and without being summoned. Progress. I stepped back, remembering rule number 7. Should you encounter Dr. Mercer, do not, under any circumstances, look at what he's working on. I need access to the supply closet, I said, keeping my eyes on his face. Dr. Mercer tilted his head, studying me. Why? Maintenance issue. There's a leak in my apartment ceiling. I need sealant. A lie, he said mildly, but an interesting one. Your predecessor was less creative. He gestured to a dark stain on the floor near the table. I'd assumed it was chemicals or bodily fluids. Now I recognized the shape of a human form, outlined as if burned into the concrete. What happened to them? He broke the rules. Dr. Mercer adjusted his glasses. Specifically, Rule 7. He looked when he shouldn't have. I kept my gaze locked on Mercer's face. And the supply closet? Contains materials essential to my work. Sensitive materials. He stepped closer. Your friend in the walls sent you, didn't he? Subject 216, the one from your past. David was subject 216. John Doe number 4 had been subject 218. I wondered who 217 was. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied. The border dwellers grow desperate as their anchors weaken, Mercer continued. They'll say anything, promise anything, to gain freedom. His expression softened, but what they truly need is renewal. Renewal? Fresh anchors, stronger connections. He nodded toward my chest. Yours is taking nicely. The guilt you carry creates excellent foundations. The spiral mark burned beneath my shirt. I didn't agree to this, I said. Few do initially. Mercer stepped forward. But consider the alternative. Your friends, trapped between worlds, suffering eternally. Or, he gestured to the dark stain on the floor. That fate, should you continue defying us. What do you want from me? Tonight? Assistance. He turned toward the supply closet. Since you're so eager to see inside, you can help carry materials for the evening's procedure. He opened the closet door, revealing not supplies, but a small, sterile room. Metal shelves lined the walls, filled with jars containing dark liquid. Within each, something pulsed, something red and spiral-shaped. The anchors, Mercer explained. Each one connects to a subject. Some weaken over time, requiring replacement. I stared at the dozens of jars, each representing a person trapped between life and death. And the subjects? The bodies? Vessels only. The consciousness returns from the border realm. But the original soul has departed. We simply repurpose what's left. He lifted a jar containing a particularly bright spiral. Subject 217, ready for renewal tonight. The jar's label read SKIM, Sandra Kim, the second victim from Mercy General. Mercer handed me the jar. Take this to the preparation room, down the hall, first door on the left. The glass felt unnaturally warm against my palms, the spiral inside pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I had what I needed now. Proof of Mercer's experiments, and possibly a way to destroy the anchors. But as I turned to leave, Mercer added, "And Mr. Marsh? Don't dawdle. Subject 217's new vessel arrives at 8 p.m. and will need you present for the transference." I froze. New vessel? Yes. Mercer smiled, eyes crinkling behind his glasses. Your cooperation tonight determines whether you become the anchor technician or the next vessel. He checked his watch. You have 30 minutes to decide. Choose wisely. I clutched the jar containing Sandra's anchor and headed for the preparation room, mind racing. 30 minutes to save my friends, destroy the anchors, and somehow escape this nightmare, or become the next empty-eyed revenant stalking Wharton's halls, The clock was ticking. The preparation room resembled a cross between a medical lab and an alchemist's workshop. Antique glassware shared space with modern centrifuges. Bunsen burners sat beside digital scales. The air smelled of chemicals and something sweetly rotten, like fruit left too long in summer heat. I placed Sandra's anchor jar on a marked circle in the center of a stainless steel table, then quickly stepped back. The spiral inside pulsed faster now, almost agitated. "Sandra," I whispered. "Can you hear me?" The liquid in the jar swirled, the spiral pattern stretching toward the glass as if reaching for me. A whiteboard on the far wall outlined the evening schedule. 8 p.m., vessel arrival, J. Santiago, drawer number 7. 8:30 p.m., anchor transference, S. Kim, J. Santiago. 9:15 p.m., orientation, Newtek, E. Marsh. 10 p.m., secondary procedure, TBB, Santiago, the drowning victim I checked on during my rounds. They were planning to put Sandra's consciousness into his body. And orientation could only mean one thing: my own conversion into whatever Mercer and his team were. I checked my watch. 7:38 p.m. 22 minutes until Santiago's body would arrive. The room had 2 other doors besides the one I'd entered through. One was labeled processing, the other cold storage access. A quick test confirmed both were locked. I turned my attention back to the anchor jars. If David was right, destroying these would free the trapped consciousnesses. But I had no idea what would happen afterward, to them or to me. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. I ducked behind a storage cabinet just as the main door opened. Ms. Holloway entered, now dressed in scrubs beneath her suit jacket. She checked the whiteboard, made a small notation, then approached Sandra's jar. "Subject 217, looking energetic today," she murmured, tapping the glass. "You'll have a fresh vessel soon, better than the last one." She picked up a clipboard and recorded something, then proceeded to a cabinet filled with vials of clear liquid. Selecting several, she placed them on a tray beside the jar. My hiding spot afforded a view of her preparations. She filled a syringe from one vial, tested it with a small squirt, then placed it carefully on the tray. The door opened again, and an orderly wheeled in a gurney bearing a sheet-covered form. "You're early," Ms. Holloway noted, checking her watch. "Traffic was light," the orderly replied. "Where do you want him?" "Transfer table's being prepped. Leave him here for now." The orderly positioned the gurney next to the steel table and departed. Ms. Holloway followed, clipboard in hand, murmuring about checking the anchor parameters. The moment the door closed, I emerged from hiding and approached the gurney. I lifted the sheet, revealing the face of a middle-aged Hispanic man, J. Santiago, from drawer number 7. His skin bore the waxy pallor of recent death, but otherwise he looked peaceful. If I destroyed Sandra's anchor, would Santiago remain dead? Or would something worse claim his body? I lowered the sheet and turned to the jar containing the pulsing spiral. Up close, I could see minute details within the pattern. Tiny symbols and glyphs that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves as I watched. The spiral in the jar mirrored the marking on my chest, which now burned with cold fire against my skin. I lifted my shirt, startled to find the mark had grown since morning, spreading tendrils across my sternum. A soft chime sounded from a speaker in the ceiling. A voice, not Mercer's, announced, "Transfer sequence initiating in 10 minutes. All personnel to Station 3. My time was running out. I scanned the room for anything that might destroy the anchors. Breaking the jars seemed too simple, and potentially dangerous if the liquid inside was harmful. Fire might work, but could release toxins or alert others immediately. Then I noticed the centrifuge. Its control panel indicated it could reach speeds high enough to potentially destabilize whatever kept the anchors intact. Working quickly, I placed Sandra's jar in the centrifuge chamber, secured the lid, and set it to maximum speed. The machine hummed to life, its pitch rising as it accelerated. The door to the processing room suddenly unlocked with an audible click. I pressed myself against the wall beside it as it swung open. A figure in a white hazmat suit entered, face obscured behind a reflective visor. They moved to the gurney, checking Santiago's body with practiced motions. I remained still, barely breathing, as the suited figure made notes on a tablet. The centrifuge continued spinning, its whine growing louder. The figure paused, head tilting toward the sound. They approached the centrifuge, reached for the control panel. I lunged, shoving them hard against the counter. The figure stumbled, visor cracking against the edge of the steel table. They straightened, turning toward me. Through the cracked visor, I glimpsed not a face, but a swirling void crossed with red spirals where eyes should be. "You," a voice rasped from within the suit. "The new vessel thinks it has choices." I backed away as the figure advanced, removing its cracked visor to reveal a face in flux, features shifting and flowing like wax, never settling into a recognizable configuration. "Do you know how many caretakers have tried to interfere?" The mouth formed and reformed with each word. 27. Each one now serves as a vessel or anchor tech. I grabbed a glass beaker from the counter and hurled it. The figure dodged easily, its movements unnaturally fluid. "Violence won't save you. The mark has already taken root." The figure gestured to my chest. "Soon you'll join us willingly. They all do, once the transformation advances." The centrifuge beeped, indicating its cycle was complete. I needed to reach it, to see if the anchor had been affected. The figure seemed to read my thoughts. "The anchor? It cannot be destroyed so easily. Mercer designed them to withstand far worse than mechanical stress." As if to prove the point, the figure moved to the centrifuge and opened it, revealing Sandra's jar, intact, the spiral inside now spinning rapidly, almost vibrating with energy. "You've only excited it," the figure said, sounding amused. "Accelerated the process." The spiral in the jar pulsed with blinding intensity, matching the rhythm of the burning sensation spreading across my chest. The overhead speaker chimed again. 5 minutes to transfer sequence." The suited figure lifted the jar, studying it. "Subject 217 is eager. Perhaps we should begin early." They carried the jar to Santiago's body and placed it on his chest. The glass glowed where it touched him, the spiral inside pressing against the surface as if trying to break through. I had to act now. Looking around desperately, my gaze fell on a small red canister mounted on the wall, a fire extinguisher. But not water or foam. Halon gas, used for suppressing fires in sensitive electronic environments. Halon worked by displacing oxygen, creating an inert atmosphere. If the anchors were some kind of organic material. I lunged for the extinguisher, ripping it from its bracket. The suited figure turned too late as I activated it, directing the invisible gas toward the jar and its keeper. The effect was immediate. The figure staggered back, clutching at its visor seals as the halon surrounded them. The jar on Santiago's chest clouded, the liquid inside turning murky as the spiral pattern began to break apart. "No!" The figure's voice distorted, dropping in pitch. "Do you know what you've done?" The jar cracked, leaking dark fluid across Santiago's sheet. The spiral dissolved into fragments, each one fading like embers dying in air. The suited figure collapsed to its knees, clawing at its chest. "The connection. You're severing." A scream erupted from the processing room, then another from somewhere deeper in the facility. The lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness for 3 heartbeats before emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in red. The overhead speaker crackled, Containment breach in sub-level 2. Anchor degradation detected. All personnel initiate Protocol 7. The suited figure writhed on the floor, the hazmat material melting and merging with the shifting features beneath. "You fool," it gasped. "The anchors don't just connect us to them. They connect us to here, to this reality." As if to emphasize the point, the figure's edges began to blur, its substance seeming to fold inward, collapsing like a star imploding. I backed toward the door, extinguisher still clutched in my hands. The mark on my chest burned fiercer than ever, and when I looked down, I saw the spiral pattern was fading, edges decomposing like the one in the jar. Throughout the facility, alarms blared. Footsteps pounded in the hallway outside, people running, shouting orders. The suited figure had almost entirely disappeared, leaving only a dark outline on the floor. Santiago's body remained motionless on the gurney, the broken jar beside him leaking the last of its contents. I needed to reach the other anchors in the supply closet. The cold storage access door suddenly unlocked with a click. Beyond it lay a shortcut back to the main morgue level, a way to bypass whatever chaos was erupting in the hallways. I hesitated, torn between escape and finishing what I'd started. The supply closet contained dozens of anchors. If I destroyed them all, would it free David, Ray, and all the others trapped between worlds? Or would it collapse whatever boundary Mercer had compromised, with unknown consequences? The facility shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling. The decision was made for me as the main door burst open, revealing Dr. Mercer, his face a mask of fury, eyes blazing with red spiral patterns. "What have you done?" he demanded, voice resonating at frequencies that made my teeth ache. Decades of work, the barrier thinned to perfection. I didn't wait for him to finish. I turned and sprinted through the cold storage access door, slamming it behind me. The passage beyond was narrow, lit only by emergency lights. Refrigeration pipes lined the ceiling, dripping condensation. I ran past rows of storage units, each bearing a name tag and temperature reading. Behind me, something heavy slammed against the door. It wouldn't hold Mercer for long. The corridor ended at a service elevator, smaller than the main one, used for transporting bodies between levels. I jabbed the call button repeatedly. Another crash echoed behind me. The door was giving way. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open. I threw myself inside, hammering the button for the first floor. As the doors began to close, Mercer appeared at the end of the corridor, his form rippling like heat mirages over summer asphalt. He raised a hand, and the lights in the elevator flickered. "You cannot escape," his voice boomed, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "The mark binds you to us." The doors sealed shut just as he reached them. I felt the elevator rise, carrying me away from sub-level 2 and its horrors. But Mercer was right about one thing. The mark remained. Though fading, the spiral on my chest still connected me to whatever forces he'd harnessed. And somewhere in the building, David and Ray were still trapped, along with countless others collected over decades. The elevator stopped at the main floor. When the doors opened, I found the normally quiet morgue in chaos. Staff I'd never seen before rushed about, carrying equipment and files. Through the windows, I glimpsed vehicles arriving in the parking lot, black sedans with tinted windows and no license plates, a cleanup operation. I slipped away from the elevator, ducking into a supply closet as 2 men in tactical gear rushed past. Through a small vent, I could hear fragments of urgent conversations. Barrier thinning rapidly, subjects destabilizing, containment protocols failing. The building trembled again, more violently this time. Dust and plaster fell from the ceiling. Whatever I'd started by destroying Sanders' anchor It was escalating. The facility, perhaps even the barrier between worlds that Mercer had mentioned, was becoming unstable. I needed to get out, but not empty-handed. I had to find evidence, something to expose what was happening here. And I needed to find a way to free my friends, even if they existed only as fragments pulled back from the border realm. My watch read 8:27 p.m. The transfer sequence should have been underway by now. Instead, the Wharton Medical Building was coming apart at the seams, and something was bleeding through from the other side. The rules no longer mattered. Survival did. The supply closet offered temporary sanctuary as I assessed my options. The mark on my chest had faded to a faint outline, the burning sensation replaced by a dull ache that pulsed in time with the building's tremors. I needed to reach the storage closet on sublevel 2, where the anchors were kept. Destroying one had caused this much disruption. What would destroying them all do? But first, I needed proof. The closet contained standard cleaning supplies, plus a rack of staff uniforms, lab coats and scrubs in various sizes. I grabbed a lab coat and a clipboard hanging nearby, hoping the simple disguise might buy me enough time to navigate the chaos. Peering through the door crack, I watched personnel rushing past, most focused on gathering equipment or securing files. Some wore tactical gear, others lab coats or scrubs. All moved with urgent purpose. When the corridor momentarily cleared, I slipped out, adopting the same hurried walk, clipboard clutched to my chest. I headed not for the exits, but for the administrative office near the main entrance, where records would be kept. The office door stood ajar, interior dark. Inside, filing cabinets had been opened, their contents partially removed or scattered across the floor. Someone had begun destroying evidence. I rifled through the papers quickly, searching for anything related to Mercer's experiments or the anchors. Most were mundane administrative documents, supply orders, maintenance requests, staff schedules. Then I found it. A thin red folder labeled Project Threshold, Subject Acquisition Protocol. Inside was a list of names, dates, and locations. Hundreds of names, spanning decades. Each entry included a designation, subject number, and status codes. I recognized 3 immediately. Chen, David, subject 216, status, active degrading, acquisition, Mercy General, Chicago Kim, Sandra, subject 217, status, active stable, acquisition, Mercy General, Chicago Patel, Raymond, subject 219, status, active/Prahan, acquisition, Mercy General Chicago. My 3 colleagues listed as acquisitions, but Ray wasn't subject 218. That had been John Doe number 4. Why the gap? The answer came as I flipped further into the file, finding a section titled Vessel Selection Criteria. It detailed the qualities sought in bodies destined to receive transferred consciousnesses. Prime vessels must be recently deceased, greater than 72 hours, minimally damaged, and without significant tissue decay. Ideal candidates expire from oxygen deprivation, electrical disruption of cardiac function, or rapid blood loss. Avoid subjects with neural trauma, advanced disease, or extensive physical damage. A clinical shopping list for corpse selection. Another page outlined anchor technician criteria. Ideal candidates demonstrate psychological vulnerability, guilt, grief, isolation, lack strong community connections, possess relevant medical maintenance skills, and exhibit high compliance tendencies. Prior connection to selected subjects enhances bonding with the threshold entity. They had chosen me specifically because of my connection to David, Sandra, and Ray. My guilt over their deaths made me the perfect candidate to become whatever a threshold entity was. The building shuddered again, harder this time. Plaster dust rained from the ceiling as lights flickered. From somewhere deep below came a sound like stressed metal giving way. I tucked the folder into my coat and headed back into the corridor, nearly colliding with Miss Holloway. Her eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed. You. I raised the clipboard defensively. The anchors are failing. What happens when they all collapse? Nothing good. She grabbed my arm, fingers digging in with surprising strength. The barrier between worlds is thin here, a natural weak point Mercer discovered in the 1950s. The anchors help maintain it, allow controlled passage. Passage for what? A violent tremor interrupted her answer, sending us both staggering against the wall. A crack appeared in the ceiling, zigzagging across the plaster. No time. She pulled me toward the exit. We need to evacuate before the threshold collapses completely. I resisted. I'm not leaving without answers. And my friends... Your friends are long dead, she snapped. What Mercer brought back were fragments, echoes. They were never complete. Then what was the point? Why bring them back at all? The fragments carry memory, knowledge. They can be... useful. Her expression shifted, something like fear flickering across her face. And they attract others. Others? From the other side of the threshold. Entities that want what we have. Physical form. Sensation. She glanced nervously at the ceiling as another crack formed. We've kept them contained, channeled. But if the anchors fail completely... She didn't need to finish. Whatever was happening beneath us, it was accelerating. Is there a way to close it? I asked. The threshold. Theoretically. Mercer's original research suggested that severing all anchor connections simultaneously might reset the boundary. She shook her head. But we've never attempted it. The risk. Of what? Collapse. Not just of the threshold, but of the space around it. This building. Maybe more. Another shock wave rolled through the structure, strong enough to knock pictures from the walls. The lights went out completely, emergency systems activating seconds later. A voice crackled over the PA system. Facility compromise imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately. Containment team to sub-level 2. Ms. Holloway's radio buzzed. She spoke rapidly into it, then turned to me. They're abandoning the site. Nuclear option. What does that mean? Controlled demolition. They're going to bury this place, threshold and all. She checked her watch. 20 minutes until detonation. 20 minutes to save my friends. Or what remained of them. Where are they keeping them? I demanded. David, Sandra, Ray. Where are they? Subject holding, sub-level 1. She hesitated, then added, but they're not what you remember. They're mostly anchor now, barely human. They are my responsibility, I insisted. I put them here. Ms. Holloway studied me, then reached into her pocket and extracted a key card. Sub-level 1, East Corridor, room 112. She pressed the card into my palm. This will get you in, but be quick. And Ellis? Her expression softened fractionally. They may not thank you for this mercy. She turned and hurried toward the exit, leaving me alone in the trembling building. I had a choice. Flee with the others, or descend once more into Wharton's depths. No choice at all, really. The main elevator refused to move, its systems offline. I took the stairs instead, descending past the basement morgue to sub-level 1, a floor I hadn't known existed until now. Unlike the earthen passageways of sub-level 2, this level was fully finished. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, numbered doors like a hospital ward. Signs pointed to different sections: subject holding, anchor fabrication, threshold monitoring. I followed the signs for subject holding, reaching a security door marked 112. Ms. Holloway's keycard unlocked it with a soft beep. Inside was a room lined with what looked like suspension tanks, cylindrical chambers filled with amber fluid, each containing a floating human form. Medical equipment monitored their vital signs, and IV lines ran through sealed ports in the glass. I moved among the tanks, checking the nameplates. Most displayed only numbers, but 3 at the far end bore familiar names: Chin, Kim, Patel. David floated in the leftmost tank, eyes closed, expression peaceful. The spiral mark covered his entire torso now, its tendrils extending up his neck and down his arms. Sandra and Ray occupied similar tanks, their bodies also marked extensively with the spiral pattern. They didn't look dead, but neither did they appear fully alive. Suspended between states, just as Ms. Holloway had described. A monitoring station nearby displayed vital signs and other metrics I didn't understand. One reading caught my attention. Anchor integrity. All 3 tanks showed rapidly declining percentages. David's read 43%, Sandra's 12%, Ray's 67%. The destruction of Sandra's anchor in the jar had affected her physical form as well. The process had already begun. The building shook again, more violently than before. A crack appeared in the concrete floor, snaking toward the tanks. I had perhaps 15 minutes before the controlled demolition Ms. Holloway had mentioned. Not enough time to move 3 suspension tanks. Not enough time to do anything but try to finish what I'd started. According to the files, the anchors maintained a threshold, the barrier between worlds. Destroying them might close that barrier, but at what cost to those connected to them? I studied the monitoring station, looking for controls. A panel labeled Emergency Release caught my eye, secured behind a keypad lock. I tried Ms. Holloway's card. Denied. The tremors intensified. On the monitors, anchor integrity percentages continued to fall. Sandra's tank beeped a warning as her reading dropped below 10%. Then I noticed something. Within their tanks, my friend's eyes had opened. All 3 stared at me through the amber fluid, fully conscious and aware. David's lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear through the glass and liquid. But I could read them. Finish it. Release us. Sandra nodded, her expression pleading. Ray pressed a hand against the glass, the spiral pattern on his palm pulsing with faint red light. A klaxon sounded, followed by an automated announcement. 10 minutes to security protocol activation. All personnel must clear the facility. I turned back to the emergency release panel. The passcode would be something significant to the project. I tried obvious combinations: Mercer's birth year, the facility's founding date. Nothing worked. Then I remembered the times from rule number 2. Never enter cold storage between 3:17 a.m. and 4:38 a.m. I punched in 3174, nothing. Then 4:38, nothing. What if they weren't just random times, but a reference to something else? Dates, perhaps. I tried March 17th, 1954. The panel beeped, lights turning green. The tanks hissed as pressure released, draining fluid into floor grates. Medical equipment detached automatically as the front panels swung open. David was the first to emerge, unsteady on his feet, dripping amber fluid. The spiral mark on his chest glowed faintly in the dim emergency lighting. "Ellis," he said, voice hoarse. "He came back." "I'm sorry," I told him. "For everything." He shook his head. "Not your fault. Never was." He glanced at the others as they stumbled from their tanks. "We need to finish this. All of us." "How?" I asked. "The anchor's in the supply closet." "No," Sandra interrupted, her voice stronger than David's. "We are the anchors now. The jars were just the beginning. Our bodies became the permanent connection." Ray nodded, supporting himself against his tank. "We need to break the connection. All of us. Together. How do we do that? David pointed to a red door at the far end of the room. The threshold chamber. Where it all started. Where it needs to end. Another violent tremor shook the room. Ceiling panels crashed down, narrowly missing us. 5 minutes to security protocol activation, the automated voice announced. 4 minutes to save my friends and stop whatever was coming through the threshold. 4 minutes to atone for my mistakes. We moved as quickly as their weakened conditions allowed, supporting each other toward the red door. Whatever lay beyond, we would face it together. The red door opened onto a catwalk suspended above a vast, circular chamber. Unlike the concrete bunker aesthetic of the rest of Sublevel 1, this space resembled a cathedral. Soaring walls that curved upward to a domed ceiling, at least 40 feet high. The entire structure appeared carved from a single piece of dark stone, its surface etched with countless spiral patterns that matched those on my friends' bodies. At the chamber's center, accessible by a narrow bridge from the catwalk, stood a raised platform. On it sat what looked like an antique operating table, surrounded by equipment both ancient and modern, vacuum tubes and digital displays, brass fittings and fiber optic cables, all cobbled together into a nightmarish amalgamation of science and something far older. But what drew our attention was the space above the table, a distortion in the air, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt, but vertical and pulsing with faint red light. Within the distortion, shapes moved. Indistinct forms that seemed to press against an invisible barrier. The threshold, David whispered. The tear between worlds. The building trembled continuously now, small debris falling from the ceiling. The automated voice reminded us, 4 minutes to security protocol activation. We made our way across the catwalk, metal groaning beneath our combined weight. Ray stumbled, nearly falling through the railing before Sandra caught him. "How do we close it?" I asked as we reached the central platform. "We're the anchors," Sandra replied, voice stronger now. "We maintain the connection. If we sever ourselves from it, we die," Ray finished matter-of-factly. "Permanently this time." I stared at them. There has to be another way. David shook his head, approaching the control panel beside the table. "We're already dead, Ellis. What Mercer brought back were fragments, echoes trapped between worlds." He gestured to the distortion. "And our presence keeps this doorway open. The others who came through," Sandra added, "the ones Mercer and his team controlled. They were just the beginning. More are waiting, pushing at the barrier. Stronger ones." As if responding to her words, the distortion rippled violently. A hand, too long, joints bent at impossible angles, briefly pressed through before being pulled back. 3 minutes to security protocol activation. Ray moved to the threshold, studying it with strange intensity. Mercer found this place in 1953, a natural weak point between worlds. He learned to exploit it, pulling consciousness back through before it could fully transition to wherever we go after death. "But why?" I demanded. "What was the point?" "Knowledge," David replied, examining the control panel. "The dead know things the living can't access. Glimpses of what lies beyond. Secrets from the border realm." He looked up at me. "Hand power. Those who returned could be shaped, controlled, used. Like weapons," Sandra added bitterly. "Or vessels for others waiting to cross over." Another tremor, strong enough to send equipment crashing to the floor. The threshold distortion expanded briefly, its edges touching the nearest monitoring station, which immediately sparked and died. "We need to close it now," Ray urged, "before something else comes through." David nodded, fingers dancing across the control panel. The system's failing, but there's enough power for one final sequence. He looked at Sandra and Ray. It'll have to be all of us simultaneously. They nodded, grim understanding passing between them. What are you going to do? I asked, suddenly afraid for them despite knowing they weren't truly alive anymore. Complete the cycle, David answered. The anchors draw power from both sides, our world and the border realm. If we channel it back into the threshold all at once, it should collapse, Sandra finished, seal itself. 2 minutes to security protocol activation. The threshold rippled again, the distortion spreading wider. Something pushed against it from the other side. A form larger than before, its features blurred but vaguely humanoid. We need to hurry, Ray said. David positioned himself at the control panel while Sandra and Ray moved to opposite sides of the threshold. All three placed their hands on nearby contact points, metal discs embedded in the equipment and platform, each etched with the spiral symbol. Ellis, David called. The final trigger requires a living person. Someone marked, but not yet converted. He pointed to a small alcove in the wall near the control panel. Inside sat a simple glass cylinder containing what looked like a handheld detonator. When we begin the sequence, the barrier will weaken temporarily. Things will try to come through. No matter what happens, what you see, you must activate the trigger when the countdown reaches 0. I moved to the alcove, retrieving the device. Its single red button was protected by a clear safety cover, like a military detonator. What happens to you? I asked, already knowing the answer. We stop existing, Sandra said gently. No more half-life, no more pain. It's what we want, Ray added. What we've wanted since Mercer brought us back. The threshold distortion expanded again, now nearly 6 feet in diameter. The shapes within it grew more distinct. Figures with too many limbs. Bodies that bent in ways nothing human could manage. 1 minute to security protocol activation. David turned to me one last time. The accident at Mercy wasn't your fault, Alice. The ventilator was sabotaged. We found out later. Mercer had agents there, selecting candidates. They arranged everything. My world tilted on its axis. What? They needed someone with guilt to become the next anchor technician. Someone connected to us. They chose you, engineered the whole thing. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. 3 years of self-hatred, of believing I'd killed my friends through negligence, all orchestrated as part of Mercer's plan. I'm sorry, David said, for what they put you through. But you can end it now. For all of us. He turned back to the control panel and initiated the sequence. Immediately, the spiral marks on their bodies brightened, red light pulsing through their veins. The air filled with a high-pitched whine as energy built around the threshold. 30 seconds to security protocol activation. The distortion flared, expanding to its largest size yet. The barrier between worlds thinned to near transparency. Through it, I glimpsed a landscape of undulating shapes and twisted architecture, all bathed in sickly red light. Figures moved there, hundreds of them, pressing forward, sensing freedom. Something rushed the weakened barrier, a mass of writhing limbs and too many eyes colliding with the threshold's edge. For a moment it paused, straining against the invisible boundary. Then it broke through. The creature that emerged was nightmare given form, a jumble of human features arranged without logic or symmetry. Multiple mouths opened across what might have been a torso, each speaking in a different voice, all simultaneously. Free, finally free. More shapes pressed at the threshold, eager to follow. David, Sandra, and Ray remained at their positions, bodies now glowing with red light, that streamed from their spiral marks into the control systems. Their faces contorted in pain, but none released their grip. A display on the control panel counted down. 10, 9, 8. The creature advanced toward me, limbs elongating, mouths widening into hungry smiles. "Give us form," the voices pleaded. "Share your reality." 7, 6, 5. More of its body squeezed through the threshold. Behind it, others were beginning to breach the barrier. 4, 3. "No, Ellis!" David shouted, his form beginning to dissolve into streams of red light. I flipped the safety cover and pressed the detonator button. A pulse of energy surged from the control panel through my friends and into the threshold. Their bodies convulsed once, then disintegrated entirely, becoming pure light that flowed into the tear between worlds. The creature caught between realities shrieked as the threshold began to collapse, its body caught half in, half out. It reached for me with its limbs, but the contracting barrier pulled it backward. "You cannot close what Mercer opened," it hissed. "The border is forever weakened now. We will find other ways through." The threshold imploded with a thunderclap that knocked me to the floor. A shockwave of energy swept outward, shattering equipment and cracking the stone walls. Then silence. Where the threshold had been, only empty air remained. My friends were gone, the tier sealed. But at what cost? Security protocol activating in 10 seconds. I had no time to contemplate it. The demolition charges would detonate any moment, burying the facility and everything in it, including any remnants of Mercer's research. I ran for the exit, racing back across the catwalk as the first explosions rumbled through the lower levels. The stairwell was my only hope, assuming it hadn't collapsed already. As I reached the red door, something made me turn back for one final look at the chamber. In the space where the threshold had been, a tiny pinprick of red light pulsed once, twice, then faded to nothing. Maybe the creature was right. Maybe the border between worlds would always remain weakened here, a scar that never fully healed. But for now, the door was closed. I sprinted through sublevel 1 as the ceiling began to cave in behind me. The stairwell remained intact, though debris partially blocked the way. I scrambled upward, passing the morgue level as water pipes burst, flooding the lower areas. The building was coming apart around me, years of structural neglect compounded by the energy released when the threshold collapsed. Each step might be my last if the stairs gave way. I reached the main floor as the eastern wing collapsed entirely. Through shattered windows, I could see the evacuation in progress. Personnel loading equipment into unmarked vans, others establishing a perimeter around the property. No one was coming back for stragglers. The main entrance was blocked by fallen beams, but I remembered another way out. The service entrance near the east corridor, where rule number 5 had demanded a light be kept on at all times. Now I understood why. The east corridor had been directly above the threshold chamber. The light was meant to stabilize the weakened reality there, to prevent accidents. I navigated the crumbling hallway, ducking under fallen light fixtures and leaping over widening cracks in the floor. The service door appeared ahead, its exit sign still illuminated despite the chaos. With one final burst of speed, I crashed through it into the cool night air, just as the building's central section imploded, collapsing inward like a dying star. The force threw me forward onto the grass. I rolled down a small embankment, coming to rest beside an ancient oak tree at the property's edge. From there, I watched as the Wharton Medical Building, with all its secrets and horrors, disappeared into a cloud of dust and debris. The thunder of its collapse echoed across the Neuse River, a final punctuation mark on a nightmare I'd barely survived. The mark on my chest had vanished completely, taking with it the connection to Mercer's twisted experiment. My friends were gone too. Not saved, perhaps, but finally released from their half-existence. As floodlights swept the area and voices called out in the darkness, I slipped away into the trees, carrying the only remaining evidence of what had happened: the red folder of Project Threshold documents, and the truth about what lay beneath New Bern's quiet exterior. Some rules are meant to be broken. Others exist for reasons beyond our understanding. The final rule, I decided, would be my own: never return to this place, where the boundary between life and death had been stretched too thin and might one day tear again. The cabin I've rented outside Boone sits nestled among pine trees that whisper secrets when winter winds pass through. 8 months since I fled New Bern, leaving behind the smoking ruins of Wharton Medical Building and its buried horrors. County officials called it a gas leak explosion. The New Bern Chronicle ran the story for 3 days before moving on to the annual Shrimp Festival. No mention of spiral symbols, missing bodies, or doorways between worlds. I should feel safe here in the mountains. I don't. The red folder of Project Threshold documents rests in a lockbox beneath my floorboards. I've sent copies to 17 journalists, 3 federal agencies, and 1 paranormal researcher. The journalists never responded. 2 federal contacts disappeared from public records. The researcher's website went dark 3 days after our communication. Someone doesn't want this story told. Last month, I drove back to New Bern, wearing a disguise that felt absurd, but necessary. The Wharton site had been cleared completely, not just the rubble, but the foundation as well. Fresh sod covered the earth as if the building never existed. A sign announced future development: Mercer Medical Plaza, breaking ground spring 2026. They're rebuilding, starting over. I visited Willow Grove Cemetery after dark, searching for the 5 graves with their called back to service epitaphs. All were gone, replaced with traditional markers and conventional dates of death. The groundskeeper I'd spoken with before had retired suddenly, moved to Florida according to the new caretaker. The past erased, rewritten to hide inconvenient truths. On my drive back to Boone, I stopped at a roadside diner. The waitress who served my coffee looked exactly like Sandra Kim. Same eyes, same small scar on her left wrist from a childhood bicycle accident. When I called her by that name, she smiled blankly and said I must be confusing her with someone else. Her name tag read Anne. I left without finishing my coffee, feeling her eyes track me to my car. 3 days later, I spotted David at a gas station across from my cabin. He wore different clothes, different hair, but his laugh remained identical as he chatted with the attendant. When our eyes met, recognition flashed briefly in his, followed by something colder, more calculating. He never approached me, but a spiral pattern appeared burned into my cabin door that night. Yesterday, Ray Patel's doppelganger moved into the cabin next door. He introduced himself as Thomas, bringing homemade bread as a welcoming gift. The bread sits untouched on my counter. They've found me, or perhaps they never lost me. The mark on my chest hasn't returned, yet sometimes I wake feeling its phantom burn. In dreams, I stand before the threshold again, watching David, Sandra, and Ray dissolve into streams of red light. In these dreams, they whisper something I couldn't hear that night, something vital. The door works both ways, Ellis. What came through gets to stay. I've started seeing Dr. Mercer in crowds, at the grocery store, the library, the local cafe. Always at a distance, never acknowledging me, but present nonetheless. His wire-rimmed glasses catch the light at odd angles, his smile unchanged since those 1950s photographs. Tonight I'm leaving this record and this cabin behind. My car is packed, destination unknown even to me. I don't believe I'll escape them, but I must try. The threshold may have closed, but whatever slipped through before the collapse, whatever wears the faces of my dead friends, continues Mercer's work in the shadows. They're watching, waiting, following. And I fear what happens when they finally decide to catch up.